I think that's where a lot of people struggle in DPC and any type of business is they don't think with the mindset that I am a business owner. They think with the mindset, oh, I'm going to provide this service, and they have no idea how to lead gen. They have no idea how to go sell. They have no idea how to capture their audience. And so the reason I wanted your story is because I feel like there's so much that you could actually bring from a perspective of you're a business owner and you're a doctor. This is Alexa with the Clinician's Atelier, and I'm super excited to have Kissi Blackwell on our podcast today.
I'm glad to be here today. My name is Kissi Blackwell. I am a DPC doctor that is in Wichita Falls, Texas. I started my practice about 7.5 years ago, and I am doing very well. My practice has been full since about 10 months into practice. So it has been a whirlwind, but it has been fun, busy, but rewarding. So I'm excited to share my story with you.
A little background, Kissi is the reason why I even got into working with DPC and private pay non-insurance based. She taught me all about it. It really was interesting because as someone that's not in the healthcare field, I didn't realize why your doctor spent 7-10 minutes with you until I was educated. Kissi actually was my first DPC website I ever made. She knew I created brands, but she was my first healthcare website that I ever designed. And so I have to thank her for pulling me into the world of DPC. I definitely want to start with the beginning.
Yes, I'm so glad that you got involved and that this has become your niche, which is really awesome. I started thinking about DPC actually a long time ago, but I was never really able to execute anything until I was settled into a practice, a hospital-based practice here in Wichita Falls. And I was getting really burned out, just like most physicians in practice. So my dad and I decided to go to a meeting, a DPC meeting, our first DPC summit. And he was interested in it too and decided to come with me. And it was this father-daughter thing we did, which was awesome. When we came back from the DPC summit, we were so excited. And I told my dad, this is what I want to do. And he's, yeah, go for it. This is right. And so I came home and the next day sold both of my cars for something less expensive. We started talking about budget and really paring down, trying to figure out how we were going to make ends meet. About 6 months later, during that time, I was trying to set everything up. I called you, I set up my website, got my business cards. You made a flyer for me, which was awesome. So the good news was that the hospital I worked for didn't have a non-compete, which means that I could talk to my patients about what I was doing and hand them a business card and that kind of thing. It was great. I was able to talk to every single patient that came through in the 4 months notice that I gave. And that was a huge part of marketing my practice. So I was lucky in that way because most physicians do have non-compete where they aren't able to talk to their patients. But interestingly enough, only about 80 of those patients came with me from my old practice. So I signed up 279 patients even before I opened my doors. And this was just me being boots on the ground and talking to everyone I knew at the hair salon, at the grocery store, at the coffee shop. I would leave my flyer anywhere anybody would let me leave my flyer. I would leave it. I would tack it up. I started talking to like the local Lions Club and the Chamber of Commerce. And so lots of different avenues where I was trying to just educate people about what DPC was. And I was also able to do a networking event, which was a women's networking event. And we know that women tend to be the ones who drive healthcare in their families. And so I thought it was the perfect place to find a lot of moms and a lot of women who wanted to make sure that their families were healthy. And we did a raffle with this beautiful purse, and people were really excited to understand and know what we were doing. So I think I definitely got some good marketing from that. And we also did a town hall where it was an open invitation for people to come and learn about what DPC was. We didn't have a huge turnout, but we had about 30 people that showed up, and everybody has some really great questions. And I think that also helped spread word in the community by word of mouth. So we did a ton. I say we, it was really me. I am the person, but I think that's what I always want to tell people that are trying to do this is that you really are marketing yourself. You are marketing you and who you are and what you bring to the table. And so getting out in front of people is so important. So good to be out there and really talking to everyone you can talk to.
That's good. I have a few questions. I didn't want to interrupt you. I want to first start with where you said you didn't have a non-compete and that you were able to share what you were doing with your current patients. What advice do you give? Because I'm sure you've talked to lots of people. What advice do you give to doctors that are not able to share what it is they're going to start doing? What advice do you give?
Sure. I was lucky in two forms. Did not have a non-compete, which means that I didn't have to go far away from where I worked to open my practice. And then I didn't have a non-solicit, where you can't sit your patients. Most people can get around the non-compete, but it's hard for them to get around the non-solicit. So what I tell those doctors is it's a good idea to get on social media and really start to get super active. Most patients get excited to see their doctor on social media and they want to become friends with their doctors because they want to feel connection with them. A profile, just start sharing medical information, You're essentially just sharing how you practice medicine or what kinds of things you're interested in. So once you do that, then you start gathering a group of people and you start gathering those people up, and then you sort of have a captive audience. And once you have that captive audience, now all of a sudden once you do find that you can start talking about your practice because maybe you've already left or whatever, then you can start turning that page into this is what I'm doing. This is what's going on, how DPC works, and bring in patients that way. And most of your patients, especially ones that you're already seeing, are going to look for you, especially the ones that really liked you and want to stay with you. They want to know where you are and where you've gone and how they can follow you. So I think that's a really good way to get around some of that non-solicit where people are like, oh, hey, I'm still connected to my doctor.
I like that. And then I have a couple other questions. So the other one is where did you find the events to go to? Like you said, the women's events, the town hall. Where were you looking to find out where to go and when the events were happening?
Sure. I actually used a lot of social media. I got into social media with like local moms. And so then I started seeing all the different events that they were putting on. Most of it was just social media, friends with the Chamber of Commerce on social media, becoming friends with the city on social media. So there's a lot of different avenues where they're putting on different ends and you can kind of interject yourself in there, becoming friends with like the hospital social media and things like that I also had done an event with the hospital at one point that was, educating like older folks. It's really good to just go on there and just try to connect with the community. Like I said, I kind of had the idea that, women are the ones that tend to be the drivers of healthcare in their families. And so I kind of, started following this local moms group. And that was where I came across this like networking group. It was a bunch of small businesses that were owned by moms that were trying to get together and take care of each other. And so I was like, hey, I'm a mom and I have a business. Let's do this, right?
My next question would be when you were educating, what did that spiel normally sound like? How did that talk sound like when you were sharing with people at these events that didn't know what you were doing or what DPC even was?
Yeah, absolutely. So you always want to have your spiel kind of down pat. Now, I can't tell you that I'm super well versed nowadays because I don't do as much of this as I used to. It also depended on who I was talking to. For instance, when I was talking to a person that I knew was a young person who maybe had family, kids, that kind of thing, we would talk about, hey, how when your kids get sick and it's hard for you to figure out where to take them and you're trying to go to urgent care and you're sitting in these waiting rooms with all these sick people, like, what if you could just call me and text me and we could take care of things by phone, or I could get them in that day and get them taken care of without you having to be in a waiting room with other people. And so I would kind of gear some of those things towards them. And I always wanted to start with what their pain points would be. So what's their pain point, and then how am I doing something to fix that for them? And so, for instance, with Medicare patients, which is a little different, most of my Medicare patients were like, well, why would I want to be with you? Because I have Medicare, right? And most of the time I would talk to them about, don't you hate it when your doctor spends only 5 minutes with you and you have 15 medical problems and you've got a lot to deal with and the list of medicines this long and you don't know whether they're interacting because no one's really paying attention. I have the time to spend with you. I can spend up to an hour with you every time you come in and we can sit down and talk about every single thing that it needs to be taken care of. So that's kind of how I would start things, is trying to figure out who I was talking to and gear it towards those people.
That's perfect. Yeah, we always talk about knowing who you're speaking to or your audience or your niche. And sometimes people think a niche is typically it tends to be one general thing, but right, you were speaking to a different crowd, a different audience here versus the parents that might be younger. What did the town hall conversation sound like? Because you may not know who you're speaking to there and who typically goes to town halls or the Chamber of Commerce.
So the town hall was kind of just random people from the community. So that was like a really big array of different people, young people, older people, Medicare, not Medicare, that kind of thing. So I did more of a presentation style during that. I had a PowerPoint and I talked about everything like set questions that I already had that I knew people were probably going to want to know about. So I had some set questions that I went ahead and answered afterwards. I opened it to questions from the crowd. And so that one was a little bit more set up like a lecture or a talk.
How did you put on this hat? Like, I'm now a business owner and I need to go out and talk to people because I feel like we said briefly earlier that sometimes people have a service, but they don't see themselves as the business owner. And so learning how to get out there and share what you're doing can be a little bit either scary or difficult, or they don't know where to start. So can you kind of share what that mindset was for you when you decided I'm going to do this?
So most physicians and even physicians now that I talk to that I help are very nervous at the marketing part and the part where they have to, market themselves and talk to people. And I will tell you that was definitely stepping on my comfort zone. And, I put my big girl pants on and realized that I had to get out there. And I think the thing that helped me the most was getting super excited about what I was doing. Like cultivating that passion and that, like, this is how healthcare should be. And I want this to happen. And I know it's good for people. And so I think being just really excited about what I was doing, I sort of just had to push past the discomfort and, get to the point where I was comfortable talking. And I think that's the reason why I was just talking to everyone. Like, I'd be in the grocery store line and somebody would start making small talk and I'm how interject what I did and how I was doing it. And so I think the more people that you talk to and the more that you practice saying things to people and the more you realize you do know what you're talking about and you do know what's going on, it just becomes easier and easier as you go.
I was going to say this kind of ties into it. So, as you're going out, sharing what you're doing, speaking to pretty much anyone that would, listen, how would they sign up? Did you, like in the town halls, have like a pre enrollment? Did you say, hey, here's my information, go check out the website? And did you take any pre enrollments? How did you manage that? Because going from, you said only 80 of your original patients came and then from there, you open with 279. So that means you got an extra 200 patients. Because I think sometimes, because I've heard you tell part of your story in the past, and I think people have a misconception that most of them were all your patients. And I kind of want to tear down that misconception that only 80 and you still racked up another 200 that weren't even your patients. So let's kind of focus there. How did you manage when you're out there selling before you even actually opened your doors? How did you manage the pre enrollments or people's interest? And was there any follow up that you did with that?
So before I even started, and I did pre-enroll patients. So before I even started pre-enrolling patients, I wanted to make sure that I had everything set up the way I wanted it to look. So my website set up, I already had Atlas MD set up. So I had a link to be able to pre-enroll people. I had my business cards, my flyers. I also made sure the phone number on my flyer was something I was going to be able to pick up. So I wanted to make sure I had everything in place so that when I started marketing, it was just easy for me to say, hey, here's my website. Go to the enroll button and just hit enroll and go. When I did the town hall where we did the lecturing and stuff, I did actually have my nurse there, and people that wanted to sign up right away could. I didn't have a ton of signups that night, so we kind of figured that that was not the best way to do things. It was better just to say, "Hey, here's my business card, here's our flyer." We also made sure on the flyer we put that before July 3rd, which is when we were going to open, if people would sign up before that date, then they would have their enrollment fee waived. So that could be from $75 for an individual up to $150 for a family. And so I think that made it a little bit more urgent for people like, oh, hey, if I do it now, then I will have to pay this enrollment fee. So that's another, I think, good way to sort of get people in the door and get them to enroll early is to try to give them that little bit of incentive to do so. So since I had everything ready, it was really just like, hey, here's my card, go to enroll. And so people were just left and right, like enrolling. It was phenomenal to watch it.
Oh, remind me. I feel like you hired me at the end of 2016 because you opened in 17, if I'm not mistaken, right?
I opened in 17.
Yes. So I feel like you hired me in 16. So you hadn't even put in your notice in yet, had you, before you hired? Can we talk a little bit about your planning? Because I feel that's another thing. I get a lot of calls from doctors like, I'm opening in 30 days. I'm opening in like 60 days. And there's sometimes like the lack of preparation. And then they're spending those 6 months later trying to still grow their practice. And they're like, why haven't I started? So can you kind of like share a little bit about that pre-planning and kind of what that process was for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I always had the idea that it was good for me to take about a year because not only did I want to have everything ready, but I also wanted to make sure that I had enough money in case for some reason I couldn't make ends meet. And so for that whole year that I was planning, I was also moonlighting and nobody knew why I was moonlighting, but I was moonlighting and I saved up $50,000 that I thought if I don't make it, then I can at least live for a little while until I can get another job. I did try to make sure that I had enough funds. I probably didn't need an entire year. I probably could have taken 6 months, but I really feel like taking a good 6 months is probably the best timeline. I know people like to do it in shorter timelines, or maybe they don't have the luxury of having a longer timeline. And or maybe they're just so tired of where they're working that they just have to get out. And so, if you have a little bit of extra time, I think it's good to take that time. It's a good idea to make sure that you have your website ready, your business cards ready, your flyer ready. Who's going to answer your phone? Get your, are you doing a Google Voice? Are you doing Doximity for faxing, working on getting your location in place so that you have an address. So lots of different things I think that are going to take time for you to put together. I don't think I would have been as successful as I was if I hadn't had everything sort of planned out and ready to go. That by the time I turned the switch on for enrollments, it was just like every day.
At what point did you turn on the enrollments? Was it 3 months out, 2 months out, 4 months out? When did the sales actually start?
The plan had been to do 4 months, but I ended up having to tell my job early that I was leaving because they kind of felt they were trying to push me into doing something on the board that I didn't want to do. And I just finally was like, I'm just going to tell them. I turned on the pre enrollment about 6 months. And during that 6 months was when I racked up that 278 patients. That was also the time the notice that I had given the clinic, I really only had to give them 4 months, but I'm giving them 6 months, which was, I'm sure, good for them too. And because I was still able to advertise for my own business, I was really trying to do everything on my own at first. I think the other thing is that people think this is going to be less busy or a walk in the park or all of a sudden you're going to have all this time. And I really feel like that's a misnomer for whatever's going on here with the DPC because it's a lot of work. It is you getting on the ground, doing a lot of work to try to bring patients in. Not only that, but also seeing patients and taking care of everything that needs to be done. And so sometimes it's not easier and sometimes it's not less busy, but it's your busy. It's your practice. And that makes a huge difference in how you feel about what you're doing.
Did you have any publicity? Like, were you featured in any news stations?
Yes.
Did you pay for any ads? Tell me a little the publicity side of things.
I think the biggest help that I had was actually a Facebook group that is still out there, DPC Docs. And the people on that site were like, newspaper ads and other ads on TV and things are really not helpful. So I didn't try to go in that direction, but I did know one of the health writers for the newspaper. And so I kind of stuck a bug in his ear about what I was doing. And then he did a story about what I was doing. And so I think was much more helpful in having a story in the paper about what I was doing versus just doing an ad. I had in that Facebook group, there was actually someone who said his sorority brother, you need to interview Dr. Blackwell. And they did. They sent someone out, and it was like, I was literally it was in the middle of the day. I had no makeup on. I was like, I was not ready for it at all. But that's the other thing is never turn those things away. It doesn't matter what you look like or where you are, what you're doing. Don't be too busy for it. Just get it done because you may not have another opportunity if you say no. The patient there that day was featured in the news article, in the news story, so we had a little piece on the news. I think try to do things rather than ads because most people skip over ads. They don't care what ads look like. They don't care what's in them. And it's not always possible to do that. But if you have the opportunity to do those things or know someone who writes for the paper or know someone who knows the anchor from your local news station, then I think those are good ways to do things for sure.
So tell me a little bit, people show interest, but they weren't ready to pull the trigger, so to speak, and enroll. Did you have a follow-up system? And also, did you offer any meet and greets? Tell me a little bit about that.
So I've never really offered meet and greets, and it was just because I was so busy. I mean, I started off with so many patients right off the bat that I just didn't have the time to do that. And then I never have afterwards. I think for the most part, if anybody doesn't mesh with me or doesn't, jibe with me, they usually kind of leave themselves out. So, and I don't really want to seem like people that sort of is picking and choosing, patients just for me or whatever. But that's just my preference. I think meet and greets are fine if that's what you like, if you're worried having patients that don't fit your practice. I really haven't felt like there's been a bunch of patients that were not a good fit or something like that. Just really haven't. And in fact, people that I thought were going to be problem patients or patients that were really going to be an issue for some reason turned out not to be. It turned out that they just really weren't being listened to in their system and they were having so much trouble trying to take care of themselves in the middle of also trying to tell their doctor what was wrong with them. And so once these patients realized that they had a doctor that listened to them and that they could trust and that would take care of them, they tended to be pretty good patients after that.
So once you opened the door, you were pretty busy. Did you keep marketing? How did you keep growing your patient panel after you opened the doors?
So I still kept doing all of those things that I've talked about were kind of during the course of when I was already in practice. So all of the nuns, talking to the Lions Club and the Chamber of Commerce. And so all of those things within that first year that I was picking up more and more patients. I just kept trying to find different avenues and different things that I could do. Like there was another instance where one of my patients, a radio show in Spanish, she invited me onto her radio show and talked about my practice we talked about some health things as well because what the radio wanted us to do. They allowed me to talk about my practice as well. And so it's really nice to be able to have, especially in Spanish, and learning everything in Spanish and getting those Spanish speaking patients to come in. And I've got a few of those now too. So that's nice to have a little bit of a niche as well. I think I just kept trying to find different ways to make sure I stay relevant. And nowadays it's a little different because I've been in practice for a long time. I've been full for a long time. But we still have turnover, people that leave, people that pass, people that move, whatever it may be. And so I don't want to completely, disappear. But most of our marketing nowadays is by word of mouth. Most patients that come in, when I ask them how they heard about us, usually say, "Oh, I'm friends with so and so who's your patient," or "My cousin comes here too." And so that's a lot of what we get nowadays. But we have started doing a little bit of, there's a local magazine that people love here in town. It's got these beautiful color pictures and everybody just really excited when they get them. It's a little bit more expensive, but now that we are a more mature practice, can set aside a better budget for marketing. They'll be doing an ad for me in their magazine, and then in January they're having a wellness issue, and so I'll have a feature in there with different questions and things about my practice. So I felt like that was kind of a good way to transition from a lot of boots on the ground and a lot of social media to a little bit more sophisticated kind of marketing. And the reason I like this over newspaper or TV ads and things like that is just like I said, this magazine I know is something that people love. Everyone flips through it. I mean, I love flipping through it because it's so pretty. And so I think it's just, I don't know, thought it was a good way for me to continue being relevant.
That's good. I wanted to point out a couple of things. One was that you continued marketing while you were running the practice. I feel often for any business owner, it doesn't even matter what kind of business you have. I think oftentimes we get complacent when we start getting some clients and patients, and then we forget to keep doing the marketing, like kind of filling that pipeline, so to speak. And so when maybe some people leave or the project's over, now you don't have anything else to work off of because you didn't continue marketing. And I think that's one of the things that makes the difference between keeping your practice full or always having turnover because you're not constantly staying relevant. So I wanted to point that out. Also, you mentioned you're pretty much like a local authority. So you've slowly built that over the years between the features, between the publicity. You took the free opportunities that you had, and then leads me into wanting to also point out you had to do a lot of the boots on the ground marketing because it was free marketing and it was an easier way to be able to grow your practice without investing the money. And I always tell people you can either pay someone to do it or you don't want to pay someone, you're going to have to invest your time to do it. So either invest your time or you invest your money to do something. And so oftentimes I think people either want to invest the money, but they don't know where to invest it. And then some of the marketing efforts flop. Or sometimes they don't feel comfortable to get out of their comfort zone. One of the podcasts that we did was getting out of your comfort zone, essentially going out, doing these events, talking to people, because let's be honest, DPC and just really any kind of person that you work one on one is relationship based. And so when you meet that person versus just reading about them or seeing them, you really want to know them. And also, the social media is great because if someone did read a feature and you're active on your social media, they can go listen to you talk. And there's a statistic that says when people hear you talk, like watch you talk on a video, their brain doesn't simulate they've never physically met you. The brain thinks, oh, I know this person. And so when they see you, they feel like they've known you forever because they saw you on a video.
I was gonna say, I keep thinking about all the different things I did because I did several Zoom meetings like this during COVID, Latino group here in town. So I would do some stuff in Spanish about COVID and things like that. And then I did something for the health department and I had my face on a billboard for the health department in COVID-19. So yeah, I mean, like really just have to keep and never say no, you know. That was something actually my dad always taught me. He's like, you know, you never say no because you never know if that opportunity will ever come up again. Anytime something comes up, like I said, this magazine feature that came up this week. They emailed me and said, "Hey, we want to feature you," and I was like, "Yeah, let's do it." And you know, so I did end up having to pay for the marketing or the ads for the year, but I got this free feature that's going to be able to these questions. Either way, like I said, the marketing budget. Whereas it's more than I've spent before. I feel like we're mature now. We have the extra money that we could invest into it. And I think it's a good investment. I think finding those things in your community that you really know are going to make the difference.
Tell me a little bit today. I know you said your practice is full. Do you have a wait list? I know you have a nurse. At what point did you bring her on? And what's your patient panel?
My nurse came with me right off the bat. At first, I had told her, I'll bring you on whenever I'm struggling and I need you. But then as we kept getting more and more and more people signing up, and by the time I almost had 300 patients, I was like, okay, I think you're coming with me. So I had her from the beginning. We are currently on a wait list. We were not actually for a little while. And from about July through last month, we had some open enrollment going on just because we had kind of dwindled down a little bit. So I kind of do that. I'll go back and forth where, okay, right now our census is a little bit low, so let's open up enrollment for a little while. Now we're full, so we've closed enrollment and we're starting a new wait list. And currently have 691 patients right now and 16 companies. I like to stay around the 700 mark. So anywhere between 675 and 700, I feel pretty comfortable. If I get too far over, I've had 750 before, and that was too much. It was just, I felt like I was too busy at that point, and then I was having trouble keeping up with everything. So that 700 mark is a really good place for me.
So when you said you didn't have a wait list for a while, how did people know you were enrolling? Did you like make an announcement?
I did. I did a little ad on Facebook where I did actually run the ad saying that we were taking new patients. And then I also changed it on my website because that's one of the times what happens is people are like, oh, hey, I saw that you're not on a wait list right now. And then I tend to times tell my patients as well because a lot of the times their family members want to join and maybe they hadn't, they knew we were on a wait list. So I always send out a mass email to my patients and say, hey, we're taking new patients. If anybody's family members want to enroll or friends or anyone else that is looking for care. And so that tends to help us a lot too. I don't do like a lot of mass advertising for that because I get worried that we'll have too many people signing up.
My last question would be, what advice would you give to someone who is starting, considering, or struggling? Let's say they opened, but they're not really getting the activity they were hoping for. And then people are starting, obviously, they're trying to get activity. You've gave so much great information today of ideas. But like, what advice would you give to someone that's starting or maybe struggling and just opened?
I would tell those people to try to get a mentor who has been doing this for a long time. I would certainly be glad to mentor anyone that would like to. And people reach out to me all the time, and I don't have any trouble with that. Or, but try to find someone local. I think that's the best thing. Someone who's in your city or even in your state that does DPC that may be willing to give you a little bit of advice because maybe you don't know your market as well as you thought you did. And maybe you need to market a little bit differently. Maybe it's that you haven't gotten out and really talked to people in person. Maybe you've done a lot of social media, but you're not really getting what you need. And I agree with you on that. If you haven't done anything with video and with you being in front of the camera, that is a huge thing. People really want to, like you said, hear you talk and see what what your personality is like. And I think that's important too with some of the marketing on social media. Um, and then maybe looking into other ways to just get out in the community, whether you join a chamber of commerce, whether you join like a BNI group. So lots of different ways that you can get out and get in front of people and really have your 1 minute ready to go so that when you do go out and are in front of people, you can just say, people will come up and say, okay, well, what is this about? And you can just get right into it. The other thing I would tell people is when you're talking to people is to always start with why. Why are you doing this? What made you so excited about DPC? And if you can make someone buy into why you're doing this and why it matters to you, then I think that hooks the patient in better than starting off with how much does it cost. Because if you start off with how much does it cost, they're going to turn around and walk away. So always speak to your passion. Like, why are you passionate about DPC and why do you think this is something that could save healthcare?
So people like as patients, just like the education aspect, like how does this help me? Like I would consider myself pretty healthy for the most part. And so, but I've been a DPC patient. And so from there, when I sat down with my doctor for 30 minutes to an hour, sometimes sharing things, that's when I saw the value. When I was able to actually be heard and share the things I was like concerned about. Even though I consider myself to be a pretty healthy person, I probably only saw my DPC doctor 3 or 4 times a year. But at the end of the day, I knew when I needed it, it was there. And I knew that I can message them at any time. Sometimes I did text. I would say I would text them a little bit more, like if something came up and I, had a question or something. And just the convenience of it as well made me see the value. So I think people also understanding, like, how are you going to solve my problems? Why do I need this? I'm a healthy person. Why do I need this? Because I think that's the hardest part. When you're sick, it's easier to convert. But when the person already thinks they're healthy and doesn't need it, that's the harder work.
I usually laugh at people when they tell me Oh, well, I won't need you that much. I never go to the doctor. And I usually say, well, those are your famous last word. Because for the most part, those tend to be the patients that need me the most after a while. So I do think that people don't realize sometimes that they are taking care of themselves and they don't really know what they're doing, but they think that they're fine. And then when they realize they have someone that will take care of them, it's relieving for them, and they can say, oh, well, now I don't have to Google all this stuff. I can go talk to my doctor. So yes. And I agree with you. If you know when you see someone coming up that when you're marketing to someone that you can take care of some pain point for them, we talked about that for sure. Always reach out to them and say, hey, I mean, I know you hate waiting in the waiting room or having to take a whole day off of work. Like you won't have to do that at my office. Sometimes we'll be able to take care of things on text message or email, and you won't even have to come into the office. Really trying to figure out what, and when you tell them what your why is, then and then they'll start talking to you about, well, I'm healthy, I'm okay. Then you can start talking to them a little bit more about what they might be having trouble with. So, yes.
Thank you so much for your time. This was such a fun chat, kind of going in through the whole process.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for joining our podcast today. And if you haven't already gotten a copy of our ebooks, we have one called Brand Personality and another one called My Ideal Patient. These two different books will not only, one, explain what branding is and what does that exactly look like, but also My Ideal Patient goes a little bit more in identifying what is your ideal patient and also what are your service offerings, as well as where can you find your ideal patient, how can you connect with them. A lot of the great information found in this podcast today actually align really great with My Ideal Patient ebook. If you want a copy of that, you can go to the Clinician Atelier and get a copy today. If you aren't already following us, go ahead and follow us. And also, if you scroll down to the bottom of this podcast, you will see quick links there. You can join our Facebook group. We're going to start in January with some live calls once a month, going over ways to better attract your ideal patient. Hope to have you as a continued listener and so happy that you joined in.